I think that means we got to get to the big one, the actual game. And Monty, you might want to find us some team lists and see if there's any interesting ins and outs for that, if they've announced them already.
I don't know if we're going to have any because I looked just before the pod and they're being very secret squirrel about this.
Yeah. Well, if you can find any interesting news on potential injuries going into it, that'd be useful. But we're going to talk about it. Melbourne Demons are taking on the Western Bulldogs for the grand final on. And this is Saturday night or Sunday?
Yeah, so it's Eastern time. It will be a night grand final, which is a first. It'll be a twilight game over in the West. But yeah, it'll be a prime time. 7 o'clock kickoff here for us on the East Coast. Don't let the Western Bulldogs finishing fifth fool you. Don't let those 3 games that they dropped at the end of the year.
Could have been number 1.
Yeah, and it always makes you think. You go back to Dusty and how he could kind of go missing and then just show up in a grand final and be the best out of 44 blokes on the field by a long way. But these are the best 2 teams all year. If you look at the worm of the ladder and where these guys were, they were pretty much first or second every week through to about the last 2 rounds where the Dogs dropped a few and had to do it the hard way and play the extra game. But I'm quite happy to see these 2 going up against it. We saw in the prelims that there was an absolute walkover for both sides. So you'd have to argue that they are by far and away the best 2 teams in the comp going at it. I tell you what, the battle of these midfields is enthralling. You've got Tim English, who's coming along as a ruckman, not a premier ruckman, but he's coming along. And then you've got Bontempelli, Jack McRae, and Tom Liberatore, arguably the best midfield trio that gets around. If possibly not for the guys that they're going up against. In Max Gawn, the best ruckman in the league. Clayton Oliver just came third in the Brownlow. Christian Petrarca, who's unreal, and Jack Viney. So that battle will be enthralling. I think where maybe it might be won and lost is the Melbourne backs against the Dogs forwards. Obviously, no Josh Bruce. Tragically, did his ACL 2 weeks out from finals.
Can I ask you a point here? Do you think it's fair he doesn't get a medal?
No, that's bullshit. I think anyone that played in the year should get a medal.
Considering he's kicked 40+ goals and
unbelievable. Happened to me actually once in a reserve. A goal. No, that's actually, what do we work it out? It's actually happened about 40 times, would you believe? No, we won a reserve grade premiership here in Canberra, and I had a broken finger and missed the grand final, and I didn't get any medals, so I'm still a bit dirty about that. But I think they should go to I think in the NFL and NBA, possibly anyone that played in that whole year. Doesn't matter if you were riding the pine the whole time, you still get rewarded with a medal or a ring in their case. Look, in the last few games, they haven't looked like they've missed him, to be honest. They've done fine just up front without him. Aaron Norton, one of the best contested marks getting around, watching his highlights of some of the screamers that he's taken on a weekly basis, unbelievable. Plus that mullet's pretty good too. And one of the more underappreciated players, I suppose, is Josh Shache, who had a big impact in the prelim, really took out the presence of Aliir from Port Adelaide. So don't underestimate his impact. But they're the 2 key battles that I'm interested in seeing. Is that the midfield battle and these sort of underexperienced, underdone Dogs forwards against this elite back 6 from Melbourne.
Yep. So you said all that. Who'd you tip?
I've gone Melbourne. I'm sorry, Macca, our Western Bulldogs mad friend and contributor to the podcast. Look, I do think this will be a really close game. Unreal matchup when they played each other twice, I think, this year, and then both really good matchups. Split it 1-1.
I think this was the first one that counts because they've got crowds, if I remember Macca's logic.
Yeah,
so.
well, technically that was quoted by our chrome domed friend Joseph in that it doesn't count if there's no crowd. There will be 60,000 over there in Perth, and it's a grand final. So I'm pretty sure
or something like that. It was.
I'm pretty sure this one counts. When you go in the record books, you don't tend to look up around 13 game. You tend to look up who won the grand final. So I think this one does count. I've gone Melbourne. I'm expecting this to be a really good close game, and I'm hoping for that too, because the prelims were both done halfway through the second quarter. It doesn't make for good viewing for the neutral. You know, if it's your team, you're cheering. You know, you've finished your beers, bloody should have, because you know that you're going through to the next week. As a fan of footy that doesn't really have a dog in the fight, just want to see a good close game. But I've gone Melbourne, and it would be amazing for guys that are grandfathers that haven't seen this team win since 1964 to be able to experience that. With their sons and their grandsons and their daughters and granddaughters by that as well. The Dogs got to experience that very similarly in 2016 after a very long hiatus of not winning any flags. I don't really have a dog in the fight. I've gone Melbourne. What do you boys think?
Yeah, for me, I've gone the opposite way, and I picked the Bulldogs. No huge reason. A few of the players potentially that have got red hot form that you hadn't mentioned, like Bailey Smith and Adam Treloar, potentially adding into that excellent midfield. Like as you said, this midfield battle is going to be crazy. It's going to be an excellent game of football in the middle of the park. So, but either way, like you say, the teams match up really well. There's great matchups across the entire park. Hard to pick. Should be a really close game. I think the odds probably reflect that for what that line will be. But don't know. I just think, and this is my last thought, I think the Demons, they maintained their level of consistency and quality throughout the year, whereas the Bulldogs, I think, had the dip, potentially their dip they needed to then hit the right rhyme of form, the form they needed to potentially win the grand final. Whereas I don't think the Demons might not have had that. So it might have just steeled the Bulldogs together maybe a little bit more. Slight edge. I don't know what it is. That's the one reason I picked them. But again, it's like you flip a coin and you could argue either way.
Well, it is hard to argue against that point, Sean. You look at the trajectory of the Dogs during this finals period, where you go back to the last week and of the regular season, and Brisbane had that emphatic win to bump them into fifth, and they had to play an elimination final and go the long way. And you just thought, this team's no chance. And then they've gone out and just won 3 from 3 convincingly in the finals, and you think, geez, that form's only just shooting up and up and up. For guys like Bailey Smith and Adam Treloar, Smith, one of the better, under 22s in the league, getting around. And I did say last week, you hate to throw the dusty word around, but one of those blokes that just turns up on big days. He's had an impeccable final series so far. And a guy like Treloar, who was just about Collingwood's best players over the last few years, for him to, just come off the bench and have an impact for the Dogs here, it's one of the better midfielders, one of the better midfields ever assembled.
Yeah, I agree, big time. So, Monks, what was your tip, and give us the odds?
You got the deciding tip here, Monks.
I do. I haven't really got too much more extra to add to that, boys.
Who swayed you the most?
I did have my pick in before you guys had your little monologues there. I have gone the D's. Yep. So
it's cheese and bickies and wines over stubbies and darts this weekend.
You might say that. They are favourites leading into the contest. They are sitting at 164 at the moment. Bulldogs are out at $2.26. Call that as you will. The line is 7.5.
Yeah, so the bookie's expecting
Yeah.
a close game. I don't see how that line represents those odds. If that was a regular
No.
season at $1.64, that'd be double-digit line for sure. But I suppose I think grand final it might be a bit closer. I also don't know if they can justify $1.64. Whilst I did tip Melbourne and you've tipped Melbourne, I'm not that keen on them at that price, I must say. But like I said before, just really want to see a good, close game of footy. We were really treated to some towards the end of the regular season, and of course in the early finals. You know that GWS Sydney Swans game that went to a point. Look, it doesn't need to go to a point, but just something that's interesting in the fourth quarter would be really nice because we haven't seen that for a few weeks.
Yeah, I agree.
True.